Right. So what I want to quickly do is, I think in terms of what we looked at very briefly last time was the just looking at the indicative spec. 1 second. So I think what we looked at was that, just to recap, so that, because I've not sent you the material, just to very brief look at what we did last time discuss, was that when you look at, this particular unit, why you want to study, personnel, why do you want to look at development and training? It's primarily because of the fact that at some stage, what you will do is within the workings of the organization, business, working with colleagues, peers, at some stage, when you go into a position wherein you are able to manage people, when you have the position in terms of responsibility, at some stage, you should be in a position to look at monitoring, delegation, and also look at development to kind of, work within your team. So sometimes when you have team managing responsibility, what you have to do is you have to identify the strengths and weaknesses of an individual. And once you identified that, you then put him appropriately to be able to do a particular work or deliver some aims and goals and objectives for you. But in certain cases, when you work within a team, what you will find is that not everybody is up to the mark in terms of the skill set, and at some stage there will be a need to do an identification on the strengths and weaknesses, but also the opportunities that person would be able to get if you have as a manager invested on his training and development. So one of the key aspects that we look at of managers working within the organization is that they are always able to pick up on the shortcomings or kind of deficiencies within the team that they work with, and then they are able to put that into some sort of a development plan which helps the individual pick up that skill and also at the same time makes the team much more effective. So the idea of studying this particular unit is to look at how learning happens within an organization. What is the role of learning? And learning will have connotations like training, development, self-development, self-managed learning. So how important is learning within the organization? We always get to hear a term like, learning organizations always win, or learning organizations always, prosper and they are able to last long as compared to competitors, is because if they have the resources within the organization, which is people in particular that we are talking about, and if they are having the cutting edge in terms of knowledge and the skill set available, they are able to contribute positively, and that also helps the organization achieve the goals and objectives. And in the process of doing that, what you need to pick up is key aspects of what this unit will teach in terms of the overall, teaching and learning would be that it will help you understand how to pick up on potential pitfalls or areas or gap areas which are essentially there when you're working within a team, in your team members. It will help you understand how do you kind of do an analysis or an audit, and that audit or analysis helps you to identify the deficiencies, and then you put that particular individual or your team member under some sort of training and development, and that training and development then leads to improvements in either productivity, efficiency, more direct correlation in terms of achievements of goals and objectives set for that individual. Now, in the process, when we do this, you're looking at understanding how learning happens. Learning happens through lots of ways. You do self-study, you do send people across on trainings, you do seminars. Sometimes you also look at or encourage learning through the route wherein the organization provides the resources or maybe sponsors a particular course, and you end up doing the course, and then they do kind of a agreement with you that you do not leave the organization because they put you under that training. But now, because the businesses are such that the aspect of business is pretty much global, it is 24/7. What needs to happen within the organization is that the organization and the employees are always learning. So the concept of self-managed learning has come about, and that is something which has come about, after the industrial revolution. We will look at benefits that it gives you in terms of understanding how learning helps the organization, helps the individual on a personal level. then at some stage, if this is something that you've understood, what you need to be able to do is understand as a manager how to do appraisals. When managers do appraisals, they definitely have that technique or that capability to understand things like the plus points within their team members, the negatives within their team members, or the areas of gap in terms of deficiencies in skill set. And then they clearly are able to chart out a plan or create a some sort of a blueprint, which when discussed with the HR person helps to put that blueprint into action. That okay, these are the areas that we identify the person has skills and strengths in. This is the kind of role that you need to give, or the job responsibilities, and if given these opportunities and the favorable working environment, the person is able to develop and is able to contribute professionally in terms of both output and also raises loyalty and motivation levels. And last but not the least, what you will learn is the technique to be able to create a PDP or a personal development plan. How do we create this working document? What does this working document consist of? And how you use this document to provide constant feedback? How do you do monitoring? And then, because what we call this as a working document is because you're always learning, you're always on a journey. So if there are things that you're able to learn, accomplish, and move on, then how do you put new things in so that you are continuously encouraging employees within the organization to kind of keep learning and keep picking up new skills which are required for the job, or for the roles and responsibilities given. And then last but not the least, what we will look at is when you put the individuals through the personal development plan or some sort of training and development within the organization, we then try and understand how learning helps in solving some of the work-based problems. Things like in the organization, you must have seen common things which managers encounter is things like time management. They kind of tend to feel that sometimes you have to have a balance in terms of certain areas wherein jobs or tasks need to be completed on time, and they can only happen if there are certain work-based techniques that we will talk about, which consist of things like say for example time management, in particular how to prioritize work. We will look at something called a Johari window. This is a scientist or a author who created a framework which decides and helps you prioritize things like, I'm pretty sure you must have heard about this, is that this is important and urgent, that kind of a framework. So what things are, how do you prioritize your things in terms of your job responsibilities? And then we look at other work-based issues or problems which employees grapple with, is things like how do they set targets? What kind of targets are set? Are they realistic? Are they smart targets? We will look at how time management works within those targets, and how how do you set targets for your peers or colleagues in general, wherein there is a balance of workload with them, and then at a certain stage they're able to look at the art of delegation. So some of these things is what we will look at learning in this particular unit, and it all starts with the process of understanding how learning takes place in an organization. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Now, in terms of just very briefly, sorry, just a second. So in terms of within your working in an organization that you currently work with, have you or has your manager or your colleagues ever created something called a personal development plan?
Well, not created, but we got the policies templates, so we do have personal development plans carried out. It's mandatory.
It's mandatory, okay. And
yeah.
Do you have one at your for yourself at your workplace?
Yeah, well, we don't actually call it personal development plan, it's called appraisals. So appraisals, it used to be called personal development plan before.
Yeah.
Where they look at what training we might need and look at our skills, but they've changed it now to appraisals, which is the same thing basically.
Right. Okay. So if I get that word again correctly, what is it called?
Appraisal.
Proprietor. P-R-I.
No, sorry. Appraisal. A-double-P.
How do you spell that?
A-double-P.
Yeah.
R-A-I.
R-A-I.
S-A-L.
So appraisal.
Yeah.
Okay. And so is it, okay, appraisal. They call it the appraisal then, is it?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Basically, okay, every organization, they might have, different terms and terminology for it, but in the context of HRM in particular, so human resources management, what we do get to see is that when we say appraisals or performance appraisals, they are normally related to annual reviews, or is a sort of the same thing that you do, but annual reviews are primarily, looking at your performance and how you've kind of, fared against the say the goals or the targets which have been set for you across the year. And then towards the end, what they do is they do a performance appraisal or an appraisal in general, wherein they kind of evaluate or benchmark against what was the target or goals or, say a sales target or objective set, and what have you been able to achieve. And then that basically takes a 360-degree view, because they look at what resources were provided by the organization, what was the help provided, what are the key tools and enablements provided for you to be able to achieve that. And in the last, what they say is, okay, what has been put in, from your end to be able to achieve, the objective set. But it is pretty much the same. I think what we are going to go by is primarily look at, have you heard about the CIPD? Have you heard about this acronym CIPD?
Yeah, yeah, my mom's CIPD qualified in HR, so yeah.
Right. Okay. So it's Chartered Institute of Professional Development, and they basically over the years, obviously, it's a very kind of an old organization. They work specifically in this area of professional development, personal development, and HR related areas. So it's a specialist body, and what they've done over the years is obviously they have created a framework which primarily looks at personal and professional development. So things like a template that we want to look at, or a plan that we want to look at, there is something which is already available from them, and that is what we kind of most organizations from a perspective of study or otherwise will look into it. So for me also, what we have done is, when we are looking at covering this particular unit, we have downloaded something called a CPD plan. Now PDP is also synonymous with CDP. CDP stands for Career Professional Development. So a lot of times when you do your self-learning, you are learning, like for example, you're studying this course at level 4 and level 5. This is more of academic learning, and this learning is, you have initiated from your own aspect, but you are maybe paying for the, the course fees and things like that. So it is primarily personal development. But at some stage, when you work within a business organization or at your place of work, there are times when the employer invests money in terms of training and development, and that takes the the form of something called career professional development, or something which, because it is supported by the employer or paid for in this case by the employer, then that takes the form of CPD. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Now, in terms of doing a PDP and a CPD, there is slight bit of differentiation, when we look at between the two. Now, a personal development plan is primarily very, very personal to you, because it is going to only talk about your goals, your objectives, and obviously what you plan to do and how you plan to achieve them, because it is related to yourself. In the case of CPD, the organization will marry the objectives of the organization with the kind of training and development it wants to facilitate within the employee's perspective, and then marry the objectives of the employee skill set, his strengths and weaknesses, but also marry and merge that with the objectives of the organization. And that is why what they do is they create something called a CPD. So they want to groom They want to kind of make sure that the person working within the organization grows within the organization and is able to, perform effectively or, work productively and then contribute successfully towards the overarching aim and objectives of the organization. So slightly different, but here the organization is marrying the objectives in terms of their goals into the skill set of the person in which the organization invests and continues to invest from a point of view of training and development throughout the time that you work within the organization. So here I think we will look at one of the continuous professional development template, CPD, primarily, but at a later stage once we have done some sort of a skills audit. What I want to do at this stage is maybe just quickly show you how do we look at a skills audit. I'll show you a practical example. This is something to send you today on the email first.
Yeah.
Just going to try and show you a skill audit, which say a student has done. And this is an example. So how do we, so I think what we want to be able to look at this moment is, look at a PPD. Give me 1 second. Let me open. What I want to be able to do is show you something which is to do with, say, PPD. Give me 1 second. Give you a particular template, that we could look at, a simple one, because, when you look at the PPD templates, there are lots of them. The one that I picked up, primarily is the one that we've looked at from CIPD in particular. And what I want to, basically add. This is one of them, and then I'll open a SWOT template as well. Give me 1 second. So got that here, and then SWOT analysis handout. Okay. Now, this is the one that normally we look at, and this is. Are you able to see this clearly?
Yeah.
Let me just make it a bit slightly bigger. Now, because obviously, the idea here is we want to create something of a working document which allows us to primarily look at, identifying our strengths and weaknesses, and we want to be able to set some sort of a goal. Now, when we do that, the idea is here the managers want to, with your manager or when you are in a managerial position, you want to be able to have a handy template or some sort of a document which basically allows you to kind of track your teams or your individual performance in terms of development happening on that particular job role or organization. If it's on an organizational basis, yes. But say, for example, in this case, you are working as maybe a supervisor, say in one of the stores, say for example, Tesco store. So you look after the IT department within a Tesco Extra store. Now, at some stage, the HR manager within that, Tesco Extra store will be working with the general manager to create a roadmap of a number of individuals who would be suited to take up managerial positions at some stage in their career. So maybe 12 to 18 months down the line, they are looking at somebody stepping into the role of, say, a manager who will take care of 3 or 4 departments within the Tesco store. Maybe the cafe, the IT department. They might also look at customer services and maybe the telecoms part of it. So it's a bigger role, responsibility being given. Now, in order to kind of work with that particular individual, what the HR manager would do is, and in general the general manager would do is, they'll identify an individual with those at least with the individual, which shows those characteristics or the key attributes that they are looking at in that personnel. And then what they do is they start documenting some of the things down onto something called a CPD, or a career professional development plan. And here what they will note down is at some stage they will do something which is called let's put it this way, a SWOT analysis of an individual's key areas and abilities. So here they do an internal analysis and you do an external analysis. So internal will be which are individually led. So you're looking at your strengths and the candidate's weaknesses. And externally would be they want to match it or map it with what kind of opportunities the employee or the individual is actually looking at working towards, and what are the areas that the opportunity the candidate actually feels threatened. That means, is the person able to work within teams? Is the person able to work independently? Is the person able to work under supervision? Is the person able to take commands, or is able to take areas wherein he needs to be supervised and he needs to be told what is to be done? And are those areas considered areas of threat or challenges for him, wherein they feel that the person will not be able to take up that responsibility? So first things first, before we develop a PDP or put together some sort of a plan for development for that individual, what we ask the person to do is to identify their own strengths and weaknesses, and what are the opportunities or challenges or threats they feel or perceive when they work within the environment. And this template, which we look at here, is also then used by the manager. And what we will do is you will fill this up, and at some stage your manager will also fill it up to try and see if at some stage they will map it together or match it, and to see which are the areas which are identified correctly as per the individual and as per the manager, and then areas which are gap areas identified on both sides. They will then start to put something together into something called the career professional development plan from an organizational perspective. And if you do it yourself as an activity, as a self activity, and put that plan into place, it will be called something called a personal development plan. Is that clear enough?
Yeah.
Okay. So what we are going to do also at this stage would be to start to look at doing, I'm going to ask you basically do your PDP. So I'm going to send this template to you that you see here today on the email. And the idea is with respect to maybe the course, but from a point of view of your overall strengths and weaknesses, I would want you to write down your strengths and weaknesses and what are your opportunities and threats that you perceive. Okay. And then at some stage, once you have done this, I'm going to ask you to concentrate on something called the PDP. To create this PDP, you will need inputs coming from your strengths and weaknesses, opportunities, threats going into this template. So for example, you would pick up things like, you would say that what do I want, need to learn, or why? So one of the areas wherein you would develop as an opportunity would be that you want to maybe become a department head, right? Yes. So in this case, this is something that you want to do or you want to become, and you put a timeline next to it in terms of by when are you looking at reaching this stage. Okay, so these are opportunities in a way, or your goals that you're going to list here in this column. Now the next thing would be, what will I do to achieve this? So here you have to put areas which are going to be developmental areas that you need to be able to accomplish to reach that goal. So a simple example that I will show you here would be that I want to be able to learn, say, as a very commissioner example, what I'm saying is, I have a learner who wants to say that I want to be perfect in making public presentations. That is something. So his main aim is, what do I want to do? I want to be able to do public presentations. Okay. Now, in order to achieve this, you will need to look at 3-4 things. One, you need to perfect your delivery. You need to research on your content. You need to be confident enough to be able to speak in front of the public. And the last but not the least, you at your end would need to kind of rehearse and practice this a number of times before you can make the public presentation. correct?
Yeah.
And then in terms of resources that you need would be when you say that I want to make, so here just to be specific, I want to make a presentation on, say, at this stage, I'm going to say, I want to make when I say I want to perfect public delivery and that too in making presentations. So here, for example, would be that I want to be able to research the data that I would need to put in the presentation. So a specific example here would be, look at the CEO of the organization. What he wants to do is he wants to give a presentation to his employees about this year's, say, sales target or the qualitative targets that the organization wants to achieve. Now, in order for him to do so, he needs to do a bit of research here in terms of how the organization performed last year. What were the good things, what were the bad things, and what were the resources actually needed to prepare that, to reach this stage. So here I would need to know last year's turnover, things like, number of employees, what were the good things, how many goals were accomplished, and things like that. And you put it here in terms of resources that you need to be able to prepare that presentation. Then next thing would be you want to be able to define something which is called the success criteria. How would you say that you've achieved this task? So if I look at going back to the example of department head, if you are able to achieve this and become a department head, then you will say that I've achieved it because the success criteria was that I wanted to become the department head. Agree?
Yeah.
And then because taking such a target would mean that, it cannot happen overnight. Now, what could be the reasons why you get promoted to the department head would be that the person who was, maybe the previous person heading the department, he or she has got a promotion. So she has moved into a bigger role. That person has moved out of the organization. Or that the other could be that at some stage she has kind of, or he or the person has given up that position, and that vacancy, because it's become vacant, you have been appointed as a department head, being the most senior person, having the most experience and things like that. And here, what we do is we put a target date. So if you are at a assistant general manager level, or maybe at a general manager level, and the department head is called the director, from here to moving to the director level can only happen within a time span of 3 years, which is something which the organization lays down in the policy. That you need to have prior work experience, having worked at that level for that long, managed a team, handle budgets into that responsibility in terms of, say, the tune of this much in terms of budget and revenue. And if you meet all those criteria, then and then only you can move into the director's position. So here what I would do is basically look at putting some sort of a timeline, realistic timeline, which will help you to go into that particular, say let you go into that particular position.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically what we want to be able to do is, when we look at the option of PDP, we want to be able to look at doing our SWOT analysis. And when we are able to do our SWOT analysis, what we can then do is put that plan into action by putting all those required deliverables or parameters into some sort of a working document. And that working document is nothing but something called the personal development plan. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Now what I want to do is obviously show you something which is, a PDP, a completed PDP. So if I show you, maybe give me 1 second. Let me find the right document. I'll try and show you something which is from, say, a previous student. Right, okay, so I've got one here. Give me 1 second to get you started so that you're aware in terms of what the PDP looks like. Okay, I've got it here, hopefully. Okay. Here we go. So just sharing the screen back with you. Now, this one, if you can see, just to give you an idea, are you able to see this now?
Yeah.
So what this particular learner did, obviously giving you an example from, I think 2014-15, one of our students. Now, this particular student was looking at from a, he created a personal development plan from a point of view of his own studies. And what he did was, he was obviously an international student, so he looked at the example of, coming to the UK for studies. But his main goal was to come here and obviously finish his master's degree. So what he did was, he basically created, a plan wherein on a yearly basis, he looked at defining certain objectives. And in order to fulfill those objectives, he set some, kind of a timeline or milestones, and then worked towards it to be able to complete that particular or achieve that milestone. And in the case of creating the plan, what he also did was he identified the impediments or, problems that he could, or issues that he could face while he's working towards that plan. So in this particular format, if we look at, what he did was, we can, for PDP, pick up any particular format. There's no set specific requirement for it. But basics is that when you choose something like this, there are 3 elements which have to be there at all costs in the plan. The first one is that it needs to have a clear, objective, which are normally called SMART objectives. That means they are specific, they are measurable, they're achievable, they are time bound, and they're realistic. So I should not say that, okay, because he was here on a 3-year visa, he could not say that I will complete my PhD, and he started only with level 4, and it wasn't possible. So that has to be kept in mind when you create a PDP, is that the objectives that you set should be SMART objectives. The second bit that you have to look at is, in the plan, is that it always needs to be time bound. That means it needs to have some sort of a timeline and a criteria for evaluation. So you should be able to benchmark what you're setting as a target, and then benchmark it against the criteria which you put forward for that plan. And the third thing that you do is, when you put this plan in place, you have to look at the anticipated outcomes or problems that you can face in achieving that plan. And this document then can be revised, on a weekly, quarterly, and yearly basis. Typically PDPs you will see will be, annual plans or long-term plans of 12 to 18 months. But at some stage, you will review this plan to ensure that you are on course to be able to achieve that objective that you have set. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So in this case, for example, the learner looked at, briefly looking at it, he looked at that he wanted to complete the HND in business, which is level 4 and 5 by August. And he had a start date of 13, an end date of 14. The resources that were required for him to accomplish, that means he needs to self-study. He identified one of the resources that he will need to regularly access would be the college library. He need to obviously attend the lectures. And on his personal, self, in terms of resources being available, what he needed to do was, in order to achieve that, he needed to have access to the internet, study material, he needed to look at time management as a skill, and obviously have the finances. That means the fees to be able to pay the university for doing the course. Then the anticipated problems or issues that were put in place was that he was looking at non-availability sometimes of tutors, some material access not available from the library, lack of time in his case in some cases, and then obviously, visa issues, for example, extensions and other things were also looked at. So this gives you an idea in terms of how he had put some sort of a PDP in place. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Now, it is more or less a similar template that we use from CIP Institute, and in this, what we are looking at is this template being slightly reorganized to suit how he had kind of made his own PDP. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So, is this something very similar you have in your organization when you say the appraisal, appraisal form or appraisal thing?
The one in my organisation is a bit, a bit more sophisticated, because
right,
we've got a SWOT analysis, which
yep,
every staff we got to fill in,
yes,
then to take it into the appraisal, and then the line manager then has got that personal development plan. Well, it's called an appraisal.
yeah,
Which is like that one that you got on the left, like that one, but there's quite a few pages to it.
right.
So it's like a more detailed version.
That is correct. Yes, I have a few detailed versions which I will show you, which is the CIPD one, which is from CMI, and is something which we refer to as a template because I think it is quite detailed and talks about things at individual levels. So, for example, if you identify something, it is normally unwritten. So this is a sample that I'm going to send to you just to get an idea, but it is quite detailed. Yes, what you're saying is correct. Okay, go on.
Yeah, so it's just that one form that we use because it's a standard template for the whole council.
Right. Okay, that's fine. So at least from that sense, I think the idea is I wanted to get some of that thought process flowing, and I can see that you have some idea in terms of creating this period. You have something already at your place of work in the council that you can primarily kind of dip into that and have your SWOT ready and dip into the PDP and have that ready so that we can progress further in this unit. Okay. Now the other thing which I want to just briefly show you is something called a skills audit. There are lots of software or websites available through which you can do skills audit now, online. But in one of the essential requirements of the assignment and one of the essential requirements of the unit will be, which is directly related to one of the activities, would be to do a personal skills audit. Okay. Now you can have again this format, the skills audit done in any particular format, but this is an idea of how some of our students have done a skills audit in terms of things that they want to improve, which is obviously coming out of the SWOT, and in terms of the long-term PDP, related directly to the long-term development in their from a career perspective. So, for example, some of the students look at wanting to improve skills in terms of reading body language, tone of voice, delivery of voice, facial expressions, and the use of IT today, which is very critical for any job, any function, or anything that you do as far as that is concerned in an organization, right?
Yes.
And what they've done is they've sent this across as a small form to their colleagues or their friends to be able to do an audit in terms of understanding they're rating them in terms of these skills and features, skill set in terms of what they feel about the person's ability in the case of say that particular field. So, for example, Feng Shui is actually sent it across to a number of our friends that are doing a similar course or working within the same organization, and she wanted them to rate her on a poor average, that kind of a rating scale on these aspects that she's considering to develop. And overall, she's collected this from 3 or 4 different, say for example, friends or colleagues, and she has kind of put this into sort of a perspective. And towards the end, after doing the skills audit, what she's done is she's summarized that in terms of what are the key areas again. She needs to look at how to develop reading or having an effective body language. And that she's put together into some sort of plan. Okay. So what I'm going to do is obviously email you 1 or 2 templates of PP for you to look at today, along with a skills audit template. Now, what we tend to do is this is going to be a sample I send you, the one on the left, and then the other one, which I send you for CIPD, would be the ones which I give you for SPOT, and also a template which is like from CMI that I kind of refer to as well. I find it quite useful, and the other one which is from the Chartered Institute of Professional Development. You can pick up any one of them, to be honest, and use it to see and understand, and then obviously create something which will be very, very specific to you. Okay. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So we will leave it at this today, and then we'll get into the theory aspect of it. I'm going to try and send you this presentation from today, which basically outlays the entire unit in terms of what and how will actually we be following this unit going forward for the next 2 or 3 weeks, to cover the content. This is one of them, and the other one which I'm going to send you is the lesson outcome 1 presentation, which basically covers learning out 1 from the indicative content of this unit. But it's something that you need to maybe read through as casual reading, and we will be discussing this in a bit more detail when we start the next session next week. Okay. Now, I know if there is another session, another class which is planned for this week, isn't it?
Not for this week, no.
Not for this week.
This one we got next week.
Not something in for Thursday or Friday if it's available in terms of time frame, because I think I missed out on the session last week.
Was it a double session last week? Was it double booked?
No, not the double session. It will be the same unit, but just to catch up on the last week's time that I missed out because of not taking the session.
Yeah, any time. Any evening this week, really. It should be okay.
What I'm going to try and do is then slot something on a Friday, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine. Right,
I'll send you an invite for Friday, and then this is something that we will, this is the one that I think we would have done last time when if I had taken the session. But because I've done it now, what I want to do is basically just give you a bit of understanding on the theoretical aspect of the PDP, so that you are able to develop it well, and that will be directly something related to learning outcome 2 and 3. So when you develop it, it will basically become a part of your assignment.
Okay.
And that will accomplish those tasks. So this is a practical bit, but we'll give you some feedback on it, and once it's refined, polished, then it will basically be just doing your task, for learning outcome 2 and 3. That is like a part of your assignment.
Okay.
Okay. So any questions? I'll send these 2 presentations to you, and 2 copies of the CIPD document and the PDP and the skills audit format, just for you to have a look at, read through, and then try and come up with your SWOT and your PDP, draft PDP that we will review in the next session, and then go through the presentation as well.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks a lot for this, Phil.
No